Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadja Akanda Rupa Sthitireva Moksho Brahmavidya Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, the worlds, living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Nicho Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shantihi Shashvati Netaresham. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. It is that which the Guru teaches. It is that which the wise ones exult in. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Ubhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. It is very good to be here in Portland, Oregon, where we're live streaming to our live streaming audience at points around the world. Places like Iceland, and they're looking in, and Hungary, and parts of India, and then all of us here in our small Sangha in the United States, which we're trying through some 25, 30 years to get to grow, and seeing the waxing and waning of that in terms of people becoming aware of this one singular philosophy that will, in the end, illumine all souls, and the single most profound philosophy ever, to quote Vivekananda, the Advaita Vedanta. So as that underground river right now, it is throwing forth many currents and eddies and surface rivers that called religions or religionism, but it itself being that which informs the religions because it maintains its non-dual position all the time and comes from that essence. That's what we just chanted about, Brahman. If you keep that in mind constantly, then that's the definition for enlightenment in India. If you forget it, then you've all of a sudden slipped into Maya, swiftly, suddenly, without even knowing it, and karmas and various sufferings come forward from that point. And it's hard to fend them off once you've already fallen in, like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering momentum. hard to reverse the outward going force. And that's somewhat what we're talking about today at the Akshi Upanishad. We've reached the third stage of yoga and we're still studying it. In yoga, you have 8 limbs. If you think of Patanjali's yoga, but of course I was just coming along the Oregon coast the last few days and had an opportunity to teach the 8-limbed yoga, and found, yes, that it's very true that yoga has fallen into the hands of the Hattis, and it's only seen in the West as a physical thing. And I see more and more evidence of that, and I warned about it 20, 25 years ago, and Vivekananda saw it coming even back in the late 1800s, that a physically based civilization and culture like this needs to be given something higher to reach for, something to aspire for. And if it isn't, it'll settle just for the atomic particle, if you want to put it that, or matter, or the way Patanjali puts it, the senses and their objects is the only life out there. And pleasures that come from them, and sort of a disconnect from there. I'm getting pleasure from the senses, but I'm not actually cognizing that pain is also coming from them because of the pleasure. It's funny how people don't understand that, and it's put so directly. So renunciation, detachment, non-attachment, discernment, discrimination between the changing and the unchanging, all these ways in which Vedanta, Tantra, Yoga, Samkhya, Buddhism, they all put it, are actually very practical things, and not just say maybe because I fear suffering, or not just because maybe I'm seeking enlightenment even, because where is that without God's grace? As Holy Mother says, you get enlightenment through God's grace, but you have to do the sadhana in the meantime to qualify yourself for that grace. It's like raising the sail to catch the wind or not. The wind's always blowing, that's God's grace. But you're not doing the sadhana to catch it, or you're not putting the kite up. You see 100 feet in the air, there's a big wind, but down here it's windless. So Sri Ramakrishna says, raise that kite and you'll see those currents up there, and catch them, and have a good day with your kite, a good kite day, and not instead of a bad hair day. That might come too with the wind. So this is all in context of teaching yoga that is 8-limbed. And now we find with the Akshi Upanishad, which is not nearly so broadcast, it's such an ancient Upanishad. Remember, we have a star map here for it, because I always bring this. There's the Akshi Upanishad under the Sukla Yajur Veda, and it's 51 Upanishads. And the Rig Veda has 10, Samaveda has 16, and then 31 in the Atharva Veda. Those are the Vedanta right there. Vedanta, Vedas, Anta. This is the end of the Vedas. In other words, what we have left of them in this day and age is 108, which is now an auspicious number. You even find it on your beads and other ways of expressing that number. Therefore, we have a study of these Upanishads, and in the 4 sections, the Yajurveda is actually broken into 2 sections, Sukla and Krishna Yajurvedas. So we've been looking, the ones you see underlined on this Upanishadic star map, you are here today, so you circle that in the philosophical universe. That's your star right now today, with the sun god teaching you, and Samkriti, the rishi, listening in. You're Samkriti as you read the scripture. You're repairing inside to the sun god, as the Upanishad, I like the way that that's put. He repaired inside to ask the sun god questions about the light of awareness. And so he has to meditate. Before you joined us, live streaming audience, we were reading from the Gospel, and Sri Ramakrishna was talking about, how do you meditate? And here's how I meditate. And so you repair inside and push everything else out. And of course that would be difficult if you're attached to the body and senses. Those stand in the way, which is here, a samsarga, achieves non-attachment. And that's where we left off last time we were here, 2 months ago. And non-attachment, then, some frightening words somehow to people who are here in the West, but actually a very practical things if you just want to retain your peace of mind and have contentment. At least that you should have. Otherwise, restlessness and depression, heaviness attend the mind all the time. In rounds, so the rajas and tamas, they call that, in cycles. And the sattva remains something desirous. And when people happen to attain sattva, usually just by the natural change of things, cycles, have a good day, as they say. They're not actually trying to attain sattva and hold it as a penultimate goal, but it falls upon them just like restlessness does and just like depression does. So, oh, I'm having a good day, they say. See, it's a mood thing, not a mode thing, as I say. You have to see them as modes and cycles, and then you can control them. Triguna-tita, they call that. Otherwise, it's guna-tita. The 3 gunas are constantly changing off. So that balance of sattva that they try and attain, they hold it for a little while, and it falls out, and that throws them a curve. You see, they're very unsettled then. They're malcontent. They're fearful. So much fear today in society. Like teaching the 8-limbed yoga, I had a couple people thought it was the devil's work. You see, they actually told me so. Oh, you're teaching the devil's thing. You should go back to Jesus or something. All I was teaching was nonviolence. It's the first premise of yoga. Is that devilish to be nonviolent nowadays? Maybe it is. I'm serious. I mean, with all the wars and the way you go about dealing with other nations and people, maybe violence is the norm now. That's how Maya has made it. Maybe it always was in the world, and I'm stupid, you see. I'm the naive one. I always thought, well, peace was the natural thing, the way to be, But maybe I'm just wrong. So, and yesterday was Swami Vivekananda's birthday. Tonight we do his puja. And this was his lunar birthday yesterday, and his solar birthday was back on the 12th. So we're looking into Swami Vivekananda as being the great example of this, and a sannyasin, or a free-moving soul, who had peace of mind first and foremost, as Holy Mother told him. You need peace of mind first and foremost, and then you can get into the higher limbs or the later stages of yoga. Without that, you really can't go anywhere but around in circles in Maya or samsara, wheel of birth and death kind of thing. Those cycles last 24 hours, or they last 100 years, or they last a yuga or a mahayuga of rotation. And that rotation is from in to out, by the way. It's not from beginning to end. There's no beginning and end to anything, Krishna tells us in the Gita. So you can have, therefore you can have lived thousands and thousands of lifetimes. If you went back to when you first stood upright, you left your monkey stage or whatever and became a man the way they're figuring it, then you couldn't have lived thousands and thousands of lifetimes in that short a time. But if you're looking at it inward, it's endless how many lifetimes you can live. So if you trace your source inward, like many of the lineages do, well, I trace myself back to, my family goes back to Krishna, or back to Ram. So they're all thinking about their ancestors as being inside. So that's exactly why Samkriti is repairing to inward to the sun god. He knows the sun god is the light of all lights, and that these billions of suns in the light sky are his expression on the physical level alone. And they represent thoughts on the subtle level. Suns are just, everything here is just thought made manifest, as Holy Mother said. Objects are just thought concretized. So matter is thought. And it's just in a different mode. In other words, the different modes are waking and dreaming. In dreaming, it's they're sun thoughts you're seeing at night, and in waking, they're gross ones. And you get misled by believing only in the gross ones, and you don't see their origin or their source, or you think it's back in a Big Bang and you're just thinking about one sun and one universe inside of a huge galaxy that's only physical. So you're really stultified by all of that. Maybe the best thing isn't to be overwhelmed by all those stars in the sky, but in the Upanishad it says, oh, Sannyasin's sitting there at the end of his life, he says, Lord, please take the sun away. And the Lord says, why? He says, because that's your external light and it's veiling your true light. So all these lights out there are, glaring, you see. He wants to see that beautiful source of all light. So some Kriti wants to go to the sun god and asks him, as you remember, because every time I've come here over the past year and a half or two that we've been studying this Upanishad, Akshi, which refers to Akshitam, the third eye, the wisdom there. Every time I've come here to teach that, I've reminded you, because we have like 2 months between our 2-week visits, you see, and I'm sort of counting on you to take these Upanishads up and see these slokas and meditate upon them and roll them over in your mind. Shruti, you heard them, now manana, roll them in your mind, and then nidijasana, realize them. And so they're your own wisdom. And some Kriti, has this wisdom, he wants to be sure of it, so he's going to the ultimate source. Check his wisdom. And so that's a good thing to do today, which is why I'm presenting the 8-limbed yoga to people, and truthfulness and ahimsa, non-violence, and non-covetousness of other goods of other beings, moderation of senses, or abstinence if you're monastic, and non-attachment to various objects. And we'll see today, because I want to show you how yoga looks at that, because this is a kind of yoga that's in the Vedas, because we're studying the Akshi Upanishad, but this is a kind of yoga that's in the later phases of India. This is like 140 AD. Patanjali lived maybe 600 years after Buddha, we think, and about 140 years after Jesus. So there was this Buddha, Jesus, Patanjali, then Shankara, and then Chaitanya, and then Sri Ramakrishna. It was kind of a march of avatars, if you might say, or a march of great souls in India every 500, 600, 700 years in this age. So just jumping ahead to show you the simple tree of yoga here, instead of all the hatha yoga asanas that you're trying to learn, and because even back in the 60s I remember going to some of the early teachers there, and they were saying they'd sit in front of their big crowds because people were really into, oh, I want to do this yoga. And the first thing the teachers would say is, yoga is not standing on your head. They like scold us, you see. Next thing they'd say is, it's not twisting your body into pretzel shapes. These are just not my sayings. I got these from teachers in the 60s who were coming from India, who wanted people to know early on that hatha yoga was barely just posture, was 1/8 of the tree, if that. And also the reason why it's being done, why are you sitting in a posture? Because Shankara came along and said, you need ekasana, one posture. If you can master this posture, cross-legged, you split the spine and Kundalini is starting to rise. If your spine is straight, your lungs can breathe right. And so the only thing I ever heard Vivekananda teach about hatha yoga was sit straight, pretend like there are hooks in your ribs connected to helium balloons, you see, and they're floating up there and your rib cage is not collapsing, you see. That's about the only thing I ever heard him say about posture in all his writings. And so if you have that posture, it's called eka, it means one in Sanskrit. You need one posture. That's so you can get into meditation, which is the 7th limb. Otherwise, you just stop there, and even breathing becomes hard without a basic knowledge of that one posture. So, Tantra, you have an exception. They'll give you 4 or 5 postures to do. Divine Mother teaching gives you 5 that she particularly likes. But this whole glut of postures is not so necessary, so that's why, and in fact it's even off-putting to the true purpose of yoga. And so testing, I go out and I see decade to decade every year maybe give a yoga retreat and see what people are thinking. And I'm finding as I test the waters that people are really still gravitating down to Hatha Yoga alone. And when I warned about that earlier, even some of my own students were saying, oh, there's no worry, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. I'm not really worried about it. I'm desiring that we climb the tree a little bit, get a better view, and get off of this body attachment and let our minds soar, free our minds. Wasn't that what you were supposed to do back in the 60s? Maybe not in quite the same way that spirituality puts it, but you want to free your mind and let it soar. And two wings of the bird is how you do that, bhakti and jnanam. That is devotion to God and increasing your wisdom base. And no mind can fail to soar when you have those two wings. So all of this as a kind of introduction to get us back on the track to the Akshi Upanishad. We're on Shloka 21. It's where we quit. I looked at our last visit, the live streaming classes that we did. If you're looking back on theirs, they're available on the SIV website, so you can revisit all the classes that we've done on the Akshi Upanishad. Let me just read it to you here. Samkriti said to the sun, teach me Brahmavidya. The sun told him, listen, I shall set forth the knowledge of reality so hard to come by which knowledge alone you will become liberated while living in the body. Jivan Mukti. Then he starts imparting the great Zen koan of Vedanta, if you want. The second sloka, all is one, unborn, tranquil, endless, certain, immutable. Therefore, see reality as spirit, be tranquil and at ease. For the adepts know yoga to be non-knowing of plurality, the spontaneous attrition of object-seeking mind. Rooted in yoga, therefore, perform actions, or, if you are averse to action, perform them not at all. So you have two ways of moving there, the monastic and the householder sort of. Aversion is felt every day to inborn tendencies to act. Nevertheless, one tends to plunge into noble actions with gusto. We wish that were true. This is written, thousands of years ago. So back then, in that age, they were probably Arya. The Aryans are the ancient Indians. Arya just means noble. So this stage here means that if you've reached this first stage of getting out of transmigratory life, if you decided that the world is unreal and that you want God and God alone, that's called first stage of yoga. And if you have that, you're on the path. If you don't have that, you're Arya. You're just noble. Why were you noble? Because you're not an animal anymore. Because you're a human being. And so they considered that to be very important. The human birth was very important to considering all the births out there possible, all the wombs you could be born in, that consciousness could occupy or associate with. Hopefully just associate with and not identify with. But the human form was then my favorite. The two-legged city is my favorite, Krishna says. There's thousand-legged cities, and there's 100-legged cities, and there's 8 and 6-legged cities, and there's spiders and centipedes and others. He's talking about everything, 4-legged cities, animals, but the two-legged is my favorite sporting place, Krishna says. So he's saying he's consciousness, and he's associating with two-legged cities, us. He's our consciousness. And so he's our source. We go back to him, and to trace our origin, and therefore we're noble. But if we set our foot on the path, and we don't want to have to trace our source anymore. We want to be the source. See, somebody asked my teacher once, well, they say, is it better to be sugar or to eat sugar? See, in other words, some people want to eat sugar. They want to be separate from God so they can have fun with God. You see. Of course, there's the Maya to consider in that play. Others want to just say, well, that's better than to eat sugar. And my teacher said, that's because they don't know the bliss of being sugar. This pat answer from an Advaitic standpoint. Nobody really has the experience of nirvikalpa or of asampragyata in this system, seedless samadhi with no forms, because senses and mind and ego, everything goes away in that samadhi. It's sort of like your deep sleep last night, how blissful you were but didn't remember. But this is blissful and remembering the bliss, identifying fully with it, like sugarcane juice full of sweetness, as Ramakrishna says. He tried to explain it. Or a salt doll walking in an ocean. Everything's gone, but the ocean's still there. So all the limiting modifiers, or the adjuncts, or the sublators, or the false superimpositions, in other words, karmas, samskaras, yada, 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 those are all missing. And you have a pure mind now. And pure mind is Brahman, Buddha mind, pure mind. So I wasn't going to get into commentary, I was just going to read, but this is basically noble actions. You're Arya. Always one hesitates as regards to instinctive actions of the unregenerate. One never refers to what may compromise others, but attends to their righteous deeds. One does gentle deeds that pain none. Always dreads transgressions and avoids all forms of sense gratification. Such a one's speech is informed by affection and love. It is lovely and fit, with due regard to time and place. With proper thought, act, and speech, one waits upon the virtuous. And getting them from all conceivable sources, one studies then the Shastras. That's part of these stages. Then the first stage of yoga comes. So we're following this now, this chart. First stage of yoga. One attains the first stage of yoga. Whoever entertains such thoughts as regard to crossing transitory life is said to have attained a state of yoga. The rest are said to be just noble. Coming to the next stage of yoga is called analysis or vichara. The sadhaka resorts to the foremost scholars, well known for their serious interpretations of Shruti and Smriti, good conduct, fixed attention, contemplation, and activities. So all the moral conduct, the ethical conduct, the karma yoga, the way to treat others, all of that is rolled into this next stage of yoga, vichara. But you see, going to find the foremost scholars is going to find your guru. Your guru should also, shouldn't just be a karma yogi, or shouldn't just be a meditator alone, or just be a bhakta alone. Should have knowledge of all the scriptures. That's very important for these early stages. And the householder is what's doing it, so the next verse is about the householder. As a householder knows his homestead, so, having mastered all that has been to be learned, the sadhaka comes to know the categories and the doctrines, vis-a-vis what has to be done and what has to be avoided. That's why, since the beginning of SRV days, we started Samkhya Yoga. You see the 24 cosmic principles. We looked into the 7 qualifications of Tantra early on, and all the Tantra teachings. We looked into the 8 limbs of yoga. Those are all things that I started early on in SRV because you were noble, and because you needed to hear these and know the doctrines. Doesn't matter if you knew them in a lifetime before. Do you remember them now is the thing, because there are souls coming forth with full memory of that. We were just talking about that the last couple of days, that Jesus remembered his Atman at 14, left his parents. Ramana Maharshi at 10. Others, wake up really quick to that. They see through the curtain of Maya. Others labor under Maya for a long time. Maybe later on work through it. But these great souls, Mother keeps everyone veiled. Nobody gets into this world without nescience. But she lifts the curtain from her avatars quick from their eyes, so they see. So they don't know anything in the beginning either. Everyone's a fool. It's a ship of fools here. We're all bozos on this bus. That's how we used to say that back in the 60s. So nobody knows anything. Only God knows. Holy Mother said that. She said, here behind the curtain of Maya, nobody knows anything. Only God is omniscient. So you check in with that Brahman, with that ultimate source. And if you have yearning, and you're noble, and you see through the facade of sense objects and their pleasures and the pain that accompanies them, then you cross transmigratory existence. I'm tending to say here that you do not have a spiritual life until you do this. It's all an admixture and it's all risky. You fall back out of it. We see it so much. So you have to be absolutely sure and certain that the world is unreal and that God is real. God is the only reality, and give up the world. In the end, the world is good for nothing except giving up. Giving it up. That's the one thing it's good for. And yes, it's called nivritti. I looked it up. To be renounced. That's the categories, the lower categories of to be renounced. They're called nivritti. What are they? Earth, air, fire, water, ether, tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, smelling. The tattvas. Nivritti they're called by some. To be renounced. You take them on so that you can renounce them. You use them to get the knowledge of what's external, and then you go to the internal. So what's external, savitarka and savichara, I'll show you soon, the seated samadhis, is everything you have to remind yourself of so that you know you're not that. See, it's not reminding you to get knowledge. That knowledge is lower knowledge. That's what's been keeping you in the cycle with your ancestors for so long. You renounce the lower knowledge to get the higher knowledge. So you're always separating the wheat from the chaff. You're always looking at the difference between God and mammon. You're always trying to know your Purusha and transcend Prakriti, nature. And it's not neither a popular notion now, or is it even thought to be sane anymore, as I was just saying. Everything opposite to it is the way you go if you're normal, or if you're in the conventional run of things. So stopping here just to say this analysis station is second, you see. Vichara bhumika. Bhumika means a sunken ground. So that's how they call the earth. The Buddhists call it that too. Bhumi is a sunken ground. You see, it's like you're walking along a nice flat ground in a high elevation. All of a sudden you have to go down in this, horrible sunken ground down there with all these darkness and fog banks and things. So the earth is like that. Or as one Swami told me a couple weeks ago in an email, the earth is just a hole in the ground, Babaji. It's just a hole in the ground. Give it up. And be yourself. Be true to yourself. So a householder knows his homestead, it says. Therefore, in the same way, the devotee has to know the categories and the doctrines. The categories are 24, basically. Earth, air, fire, water, ether, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, seeing. Those 10 in your mind, dream state. So you are giving up the outer, as you know them, for the inner, because the outer connects to the inner. People don't know that. They think the outer connects to the past. You see, a big bang or something like that. You see, some evolution. You see, but evolution and involution is going from outside in, not from forward and back, and it certainly doesn't go from up to down. There's no hell below you. There's no heaven up there, is what we're saying. There's no devil down there, and there's no God above you. And when I came up the coast yesterday, people were still thinking that when I tried to teach them. They really do actually think that way, some of them. So turn the train of that. Samkriti is hearing this straight from the sun god, remember. Surya Narayan. Surya Narayan. He's gone to the sun in the form of a great soul, a man, Narayan, and who is the light of all lights. And so he said he should be able to clarify every little shadow of doubt for me that still occupies my mind. So I'll be fully illumined. As a snake sheds its slough, so sheds he even the slightest attachment to external objects when intensified by pride, conceit, intolerance, greed, and delusion. No, keep the objects if they're not flavored by those things. See? They're not saying that. See? I mean, it's your householder, so you can't renounce them outwardly. You renounce them in here, as Ramakrishna said. You move amongst them, but they shouldn't impede you in the least. And you shouldn't hold any doubts about what's real and what's not real. And who is worthy of love? The Lord alone, and all else, get thee behind me if it's not aligned with that. With a mind disciplined through devotion to the Shastras, to the teacher, and the company of the virtuous, he truthfully masters the entire body of knowledge, including all the secret doctrines. Who does that sound like? Surprisingly enough, exactly what Lord Buddha said in the Dhammapada. That's why I like early Buddhism in India, because he wanted you to master all the words, all the doctrines and everything. You think he was just some guy that went out and had some nirvikalpa and then, didn't like the word self, and then told you to, to have some transcendental nirvana, and that words were not important and scriptures were not important just because he didn't follow the Vedas to the letter of the law. Then you've got a lot coming, as they say. He wanted you to master everything and take your place among the wise. That's how he put it. Master all the doctrines, it's like Vivekananda in this day and age. He said, well, we want to go beyond Quran. We want to go beyond Bible. And we want to go beyond Gita. But not by throwing them out. By studying them, knowing them, and then transcending them. See? So he said, that's my old-fashioned way. He followed up that statement. That's my old-fashioned way. And master them. Know them. And that's what they're there for, and that's what teachers are keeping them there for. So you're reminded in every lifetime, this is Shiva's work. It's called the four feet of Shiva. One of them is to keep the scriptures in the public eye. Keep those teachings there for people. Is that to save the world? Don't be ridiculous. There's no saving this world. It doesn't exist. How can you save it? But you can churn it and watch the cream rise. See? So here's the cream right here. See? The 2% is out there. Some souls come forward from this churning process and they get enlightened. A few thousand every age. See? The rest all just go on in cycles. And if you follow the teachings for as long as you can, for as many lifetimes as you can, till you understand them, you see that there's no hope for the world whatsoever. Not only because it doesn't exist, it's because there are people who are demonic and who cling to it and who will fight you tooth and nail to the very end. Why do you think all the scriptures are full of war? Every one of them. Gita, Quran, Bible, full of war on all sides. Does that sound like ahimsa? They're preparing you for the battle. See? And so the Gita isn't, just they say, oh yes, it's just sort of like a representation of having to fight out here. No, actually that's also a representation of how the world is and always will be. So give up all hope for the world. Another Buddha saying, see, I'm gone and gone forever. Have no hope for me forevermore for this world. I'm gone and gone forever. And I'm to think probably Christ was like that too. Because 2,000 years, where is he? He came once, he gave his message, you didn't follow. You treated him badly. So you want to come back? Was he even here in the first place? Or was he just consciousness? So, you need to follow him as an exemplar, not fall under the influence of a savior. You save yourself. That's why those froth, they float to the top, because they've got the idea I want to be a lamp unto myself. See, nobody's going to help me here, but I have an example there to follow. So thank God for that. Fixing the steady mind on truthful import of the Shastras and busy with the recitation of the texts, proper to the hermitages of the ascetics, that one expends long life seated on a bed of stone or a slab, diverting himself with ramblings in the forest made beautiful by his own placid mind. So if the world isn't all that great, you make it so with your mind, because it came out of your mind. So render it back to a placid, beautiful state again instead of a chaotic riot. And sit on a slab for a while if you have to do that, 49 days or 12 days and 12 nights in the wilderness, whatever it takes. See it as Brahman. That's all it is. As a result of meritorious actions, the righteous sadhaka passes his time in the delights of detachment, repeatedly studying the positive shastras. So that whole section, Vichara, mentions shastras, scriptures, many times. Now we're coming up to where we left off, 19. One's perception of reality becomes clear only in due course. The enlightened one reaching the third stage experiences this for himself. So from sloka 19 on to, I have it marked, 29, is this stage of asamsarga, achieves non-attachment. So if you're following the 7 stages of yoga, which nobody knows about in this day and age, almost nobody, so I made a chart of it because it's in the Akshi Upanishad, which is in the Yajurveda, and where do you find it? There's no books on it. Even in English, you have a few minor Upanishads put out there, and I told you all the underlined ones are the 10 major ones that Shankara commented on, so we know something about them. All the rest of us kind of fall behind, you see, in ancient memory of mind. But if you bring something out like this, and you put it next to the 8-limb yoga, which I'm going to do, 7 stages of yoga and 8 limbs, we're going to try and put Patanjali side by side with Akshi Upanishad and see how that translates, as far as detaching from the world. So we took that last week, last visit. Here we took this one too. Non-attachment is of 2 kinds. Listen to the distinction as it is being drawn. This non-attachment is of 2 kinds, one general and the other superior. And here's where we start a new sloka today. The general non-attachment is non-involvement in objects, based upon the perception, quote, that I am neither the agent nor the enjoyer, neither the sublater nor the sublated. So this is your attitude of non-doing, non-agency, and non-separation. I have a chart to show you probably tomorrow about that. 3 stages of spiritual evolution, it's called. If you want it put nicely, you just say, I'm not the agent of my actions, if you can really understand that. And I'm not the owner of anything. And I'm not separate from Brahman. Basically, if you wanted to put it in Vedic speak, you could measure your 3 stages of spiritual evolution by those 3 things. If you don't own anything, for a householder that means you'd move among things. And like Surya Narayan was just saying the gospel before he came on. They took me down and wanted me to sign my name for some land from my family gave to me, and I couldn't sign my name, you see. So he was an extreme case of that virtue or that problem, depending on how it presents itself to you. Then non-agency. I'm not the agent of my actions, and that's very, very hard to say it and mean it. He has a beautiful quote here. Coming up. Here it is. Everything, be it pleasure or pain, is fashioned by prior deeds, or everything is under the sway of the Lord. I do nothing in regard to it. So he gives you 2 things there. It's either the Lord is doing it all, which is a very hard position to defer to for most people. Get rid of their ego, in other words. The Lord is doing it all. Because people say that like a parrot, but it doesn't last very long. As soon as something comes up, their ego is right back in there, trying to prove it to themselves or be in charge of things. And they're not actually accepting of every bad thing that happens to them. They think they can go heal it or something. See, but they're just those souls who are silent and peaceful and quiescent and so forth. Okay, something good happens to them. Okay, something bad happens to them. Okay, It's all the will of the Lord. It's all the will of the Lord. It's very hard. Sri Ramakrishna was a good example of that. Otherwise, it's my own karma. That's the other. So you can't blame it on the devil or your ancestors or, whatever. See, those are the two positions that you have to take with regards to this sense of agency, that he's beginning to kick the dead horse about, you see, for people. See, and now the next, I'm going to read them right down because they're so beautiful. Enjoyments and non-enjoyments are dread diseases. Possessions are great disasters. All contexts just promote separation. Sufferings are diseases of thoughts. That's one sloka right there. Time is ceaselessly fashioning all things, so the general non-attachment of the sadhaka who has grasped the import of the major texts consists of being averse to all things and in not dwelling on them mentally. By cultivating the sequence of stages, the superior non-attachment in the case of the magnanimous sadhaka supervenes. It is said to be silence, repose, and quiescence, for speech and import have been flung far away in the light of truth. Quote, I am no agent. The agent is either God or my own prior karmas. He says it again, to add emphasis to that. I am no agent. It's either God or my own karmas. And my own karmas aren't really mine either. The I he's talking about is the Atman. I am no agent. See, I know this, but I have to default back to karmas as long as my ego is still in charge of the game here, or in any way insinuating itself into it, just to be practical. And the real truth of it is that God is the only doer. I do nothing. Ramana Maharshi's words. That's his favorite position. And with Sri Ramakrishna too. Those two exemplified the I do nothing, and really in a realized way. And I think others really got it that deeply. And basically, Sri Ramakrishna liked it in this way too. One of his favorite ways of putting it was this. His favorite song. Shakale tomaricha icha mai taratumi tomar karma tumi karma Loke bale kari ami Manke bada kara kari Mangure ranga ogiri Kare doma brahma pada Kare kara adogami Ami jantra, tumi jantri, Ami gar, tumi garani, Ami rata, tumi rati, Chemi chalu, temi chori, Shakale, tomaricha, Icha mai taratumi tomar karma tumi karma loke bale kariyami shakale tomaricha shakale tomaricha. So these verses roll along. Oh, Mother, you are you cause everything to happen. All happens by thy own insurmountable will. all work belongs to you, others only call it their own. See, so you see where he's coming from in these scriptures. All work belongs to you, others only call it your own. So it's either the work of God or it's my own karmas. I'm going to be that honest with it. See, I know that it's all God, but if I have my own karmas involved in it, then I have to take responsibility for those until I can neutralize them. So you trap the powerful elephant in the mire, but cause the lame man to scale the highest mountain. How's that, you see? On some you hurl into the world of suffering, on some you raise into the heights of spiritual bliss. O Mother, inscrutable is thy will. How can I fathom it? You are the machine, I'm the operator. I'm sorry, opposite. I'm the machine, you are the operator. I'm the house, you are the indweller. I'm the chariot, you are the charioteer. I do as you do through me. I speak as you speak through me. So Sri Ramakrishna liked that song of Raj Ramchandra, is the man who wrote that, and liked that very much because that expressed what he felt truly as he gave himself 100% away to Mother Kali. 100%. Sometimes he said 120%. Gave himself away to her. So musically speaking, we could explain it in that way. And then we come to, by cultivating this sequence of stages, 3 now, right? The superior non-attachment in the case of the sadhaka supervenes. Its silence, repose, and quiescence. For speech and import have been flung far away in the light of the truth. So silence sets in. Na vacho nivartante prapya manasa saha ananda brahmana vidvan na bibeti kutaschaneti. Shankara says about yoga in the Vivekachudamani. That Brahman from which word and speech fall away, unable to express it. The one who realizes the bliss of that Brahman escapes doubt and fear for all time. So, na vacha nivartante, vacha speech falls away. Cannot express it anymore. So, silence overtakes the mind. So, if Ramana Maharshi left, his family when he was 10 or whatever, and disappeared from the house, and they later found him silent out in the woods, you see. Can you say something? He wrote something down finally. Erased it, wrote it down. He wouldn't speak. Buddha under the bo tree, couldn't speak. So, tongue is silenced. It's the first limb of yoga, which we can look at tomorrow. You see, control of speech, according to Vivekananda's, Shankara's way of putting these doorways to yoga, he calls them. So you've got a lot of people here. You've got Samkriti and the sun god 5,000 years back. Then you've got Patanjali 140 BC talking about stages and limbs of yoga. Then you've got Shankara talking about doorways to yoga in 700 AD. You might as well call the four Noble Truths, especially the Eightfold Path of Buddha, another eight system of yoga steps. Right orientation and all these things, you see. Might as well be, right orientation might as well be ahimsa. If you're rightly oriented, you're not hurting anything as you move through the world, you see. But if you're not rightly oriented, you're causing violence everywhere, even if it isn't actual physical violence. And you're leaving behind effects that you don't even know about that catch up with you later, which is part of this problem of suffering and pleasure with objects that we're going through so down to the nth degree in the West in this day and age, with our love of the atomic particle, our death grasp on the atomic particle as if it were everything, when it's nothing. So this has been then a further introduction to where we are, because now we've read everything in a row, what we've said pretty much, over the last 5 or 6 meetings that we've started the Akshi Upanishad. We're at sloka 21. This Upanishad has 48 slokas, so we're about halfway through, and we're at the 3rd stage. Okay, so that kind of talk about right orientation now. Kind of hopefully that orients us to where we are on the star map, where we are in the actual slokas, and what Samkriti is beginning to hear as far as the 7 stages of yoga from the sun god, Surya Narayan. It's not some fable or some myth. You see, this is the interior world that you will go to after death. Some level of it the soul will attend upon, unless you're so fortunate as to go formless in nirvana or something. But some form of those 7 chakras, some form of those 7 worlds, some forms of those chambers of my Father's house, you will go into those. And as far as the luminaries of India are concerned, may you get beyond the 3rd world and the ancestors and their transmigratory process, and know that you don't want to do that anymore. See, unless you're coming back with all your weapons brandished. See, I like that expression, armed to the teeth. See, you know where that came from? Armed to the teeth. And you were a pirate. See, you're boarding the British or Portuguese ships. You see, you had to swing over, right? So, what do you do with your sword and knife? See, you make even a more ferocious vision, don't you, with these pirates coming at you, with their sword in their teeth, their lips bleeding. So you have to arm yourself to the teeth in this world and do battle with Maya. See, some people consider that to be a lot of fun. If they have a lot of strength, then they say like you're the warrior, you see. But even warriors get tired of the battle finally and just retire and watch, you see. They become the sage. So warrior to sage is kind of a contemporary way of putting that. But it would be better for you if you came into the world with these tools already in hand. In other words, you wouldn't have to earn them. You wouldn't have to earn them anew, and you wouldn't have to even remember them. You see, you just bring them out when you need them, and that's a past master, as compared to, say, an adept, or maybe even some masters. A past master has these right available, and is there, Johnny on the spot, as they say, to help you out of the transmigratory process. If it can get you through that first stage, it's almost like they gave you a push downhill, you see, because everything leading up to that was uphill. It's a lot of weight to push, especially with the obesity out there today. In our culture, to push you uphill, at least be skinny. So, basically, transmigratory life give you a push over that, and they can also watch you go down and wave, you see. Like Vivekananda said, let's get past that stage and then we can compare notes later. And let's not just sit around and say, oh, we're great now, because we've heard about this. Then he followed that up by saying, we're not great, we're idiots. He included himself in on that. We're all fools, he said, to have come here, he means, to have gotten ourselves in this predicament in the first place. And if you get the taste of freedom in your wind, in your sails, you'll feel this all the time. Feel like this world is a hole in the ground. And that's not callousness, nor is it bitterness. It's practicality. And then only can you be not part of the problem and part of the solution. Only when you're free can you help others. Otherwise, it's a mixed bag of karmas you're bringing back on people and yourself. And that's where this falling off in yoga. 9 vikshepas, or antarayas they call them in yoga. And the 3 physical, 2 physical, 3 mental, 1 intellectual, and 2 spiritual by the father of yoga. And the last 2 that are spiritual is backsliding, is one of them. Alabdha bhumi katvan. Anavasti tatvani. Those 2 are backsliding. See, I make 1 step forward and then I slide 2 back. So I'm never sure and certain about my progress. And I'm always in doubt, you see. It's a spiritual problem, not just a mental or intellectual one. So again, if you have a measure, you see, and you're very certain about it, and then like the 3 stages of spiritual evolution, you see, I know I don't own anything. I renounce it. See, whether I'm monk or householder, I renounce it. That's just a little different way you do it. And then I'm not the agent of my actions, you see. I give that all to Lord, you see, to the mother. She does everything. I do nothing. Listen to my song, see. Read my book, see. Watch my lips, see. And then finally, I get rid of that final sense of separation, he says here, see. So enjoyments and non-enjoyments are dread diseases, possessions are great disasters, all contacts promote separation. So if I'm in contact with anything else other than God, that's a separation from God, because God isn't a thing. So your mind, does that shift, that inner alchemy. We were talking about that with the Tripura Sundari Upanishad we studied on retreat a few months ago, where Bhurbhuvasvaha is the three worlds of transmigration. But there's also Tripura Sundari, the three worlds of Mother. So you take yourself out of those three worlds and you put yourself in these three worlds. What allows you to do that? The mantra. If you get the mantra for Mother, right away you're out of the transmigratory process and you're at her feet. And you see her as many-armed. Sitting in here yesterday with a young Mexican man in his late teens. He said, what's Mother Kali? So I was sitting on that couch. I looked this way and saw Mother Kali up on the shelf. So I stood up and I walked up. I said, Om Kali. I took the image down and took it over to the couch and gave him about a 20-minute talk on what Mother Kali is. You want to know why she stands on Shiva and things, and why she does like this, you see, this. Why she's holding a severed head, especially, So I can see how the teenagers could really get into this, you see. Sort of a fascination with that. I mean, they see worse than that on TV, so I'm not going to make excuses for it. But anyway, so he was leaving in the car, and he was out in his car with his mother, and I walked down the stairs here and looked out the door, and he was in his car, and he looked and saw me, and I went, and he went. So that means fearlessness, you see, abhaya mudra. And Mother will give you that, and then she'll give you boons. You can't get the boons unless you're fearless, though. That's kind of the idea behind it. So all contexts just promote separation. You have to look at everything as homogeneous. Everything is all pervasive. You see, everything is indivisible, inseparable. There's some good words in English that can it's sort of like water just mix when you put it together. You see, but oil and water won't. So you have to have that pure admixture. Your mind has to be pure of these overlays. So in this context, then, let's look. Now that I think you're pretty well oriented here, I would think, if I were to read you that very quickly. By cultivating this sequence of stages, a superior non-attachment in the case of the seeker supervenes. It is said to be silent, reposed, and quiescent, for speech and import have been entirely cast off in the light of truth. That being, I am no agent, the agent is God, or my own prior actions. That's sloka we read. Here's one about the first stage is an ambrosial sprout. Okay, he says, the sun god says to Samkriti, and is the internal cleansed birthplace of the other stages. So you cannot get to these if you're not cleaned by this. See? If you're not absolutely sure that the world's a hole in the ground, like if you were a monk. See? If you had any sort of idea that you're going to go back to it. See? Like Swami Bhaskarnanda up in Seattle told me some years ago, just be sure when you get into teaching this dharma to the Westerners that a monk is a person who takes a canoe to a far off island and burns it when he gets there. He's never coming back. If he's not a monk, if not a sannyasin, if not. Oh, I mean, the sannyasins they're making nowadays, Vivekananda even criticized them back in the 1890s. Oh, I'm all too aware of the modern sannyas idea. And he was so against it that you wouldn't, follow the letter of the law and the tradition to give up things, but you could actually be a sannyas and still have women, and you could still have objects, and you could still have pleasures and all that. As if the world were something that you didn't quite let go of. See? Like Sri Ramakrishna said, licking the spittle you spat out from the sidewalk 2 minutes ago. So that you would go back and do that? So you have to be absolutely clear, and then it would be the internal cleansed birthplace for all the rest of these to take. Otherwise, you're better off working on this. See, the way Sri Ramakrishna put that once is the mother cat. She has her claws out, and her teeth bared for the rat. See, the mouse. But for the kitten, she retracts the claws and covers the fangs with her lips. See, takes the kitten here and there in the master's house. So this is the mother cat with her, the same mother with her fangs bared and her claws out, for those who haven't learned that the world is to be renounced. You're here to renounce it. You probably should have renounced it before you came here, as we're saying, and seen it just as a dream, or a play, if you wish, or an expression of Brahman. There are other kinder ways of saying it, but people who are averse to what's going on here, they're not going to be kind to it. And so you have to know that those beings are burning the canoe. You see, this is the last time you'll see them. Buddha said, I'm gone and gone forever, have no more hope for me. He came here just to enact freedom in front of you, enact his own freedom in front of you. So did Jesus, so did Krishna and others. And they each do it a bit in their own way. But some of them are more ascetic, and some of them are a little bit, like kshatriyas, warriors. Vivekananda said, whenever the Brahmin priests got the religion, they wouldn't give it to the people. When the warrior caste got the teachings of the Dharma, they gave it to the people. So all the great teachers, Krishna, Ram, and so forth, they were all warrior caste, kshatriyas. They had an eye out for the people. See, the Brahmin priests were like, we have to keep this from everyone. You see, it's a secret doctrine. And Vivekananda didn't like that at all. He didn't like the word mystic. See, that you'd had to keep something secret. You see, he wanted to broadcast this door to door. See. And probably in this age, why not? What have you got to lose? See, you say, well, I'm going to compromise it. I risk compromising it by giving it to everyone. Well, at least they're going to hear it. You see, better than that they hear it and to reject it and never hear it at all. See? Because it'll plant a seed in there. I mean, if I'm the devil, I'm preaching this, then I made a lot bigger impression on that person's mind who thought I was the devil than if I didn't go there at all. You see, that devilish guy. What was he talking about? Ahimsa? Well, someday maybe he'll think, well, maybe that's not the work of the devil. Maybe I should be peaceful. What a novel idea. So the first stage is an ambrosial sprout. It is the internal cleansed birthplace of the other stages. Among these early stages, the third stage is superior, for it is here that the sadhaka outgrows the tendency to imagine and thereby get ensnared by his own mind in Maya. So no God, no devil out there doing this for you. You're dreaming. And you have extravagant dreams. The more extravagant, the better you like them. Until the nightmares come along with them. And so it's all called sankalpa, and we have no word for it in English. The closest thing we'd have in Western psychology would be complex. See? But unfortunately, that needs a pill and a lot of talking about. But in yoga psychology, what you do is you do sadhana. So you become a sadhaka. You check into the doctrines. You learn the categories. You find out where your karmas are lurking. Your teacher tells you how to get rid of them with certain practices, and it's done with. And that's called sadhaka, and that's what's different than therapy of today. You do something about it, because you're the only one that can. I mean, when Samkriti comes here and asks, the first thing he says to the sun god is, teach me Brahmavid. The first thing sun god says back to him is, all is one, unborn, tranquil, and endless. Now, if Samkriti had have come to the sun god, you see, and said, teach me, I'm not feeling well, you see. I just had something bad happen back on Earth, and if the sun god had responded, how do you feel about that? That would have been the psychologist's question, right? Would have been the birth of it. See, how do you feel about that, Samkriti? Let's start talking about it on that level, you see. But this is a high-minded soul, so he's saying, teach me Brahmavid, because he knows right away that that's the only thing that's going to get rid of his ignorance. Knowledge. Not advice. Knowledge will get rid of ignorance. Na hi ginena sadrishyam pavitrami havidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalenat mani vindate. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Gita when he asks that. Knowledge is the supreme purifier. And the sages know this. See, in the end they'll tell you this, that knowledge gets rid of ignorance like nothing else. Of course. So, of course, he's going for Brahmavid, not Aparavid. He didn't ask him, about lower things. See, like, what's pi squared, or what's the theorem, or how do I make yogurt out of cow's milk or something. I want Brahmavid right away. I want the highest wisdom. So the first stage is an ambrosial sprout, but this third stage is really where it's all heading. From there you can outgrow your tendency to imagine. So non-attachment to things, asamsarga. So before the break, let's broach what I wanted to, where we started. I think I even showed this, although I don't know if it was the new version, it's colorized now, the seated samadhis of yoga, it's called. So playing off this chart, now that you're aware of the first three stages, and I've showed you or flashed you the 8 limbs of yoga, then as you're working your way up the 8 limbs of yoga here, you get nonviolence, truthfulness, you don't covet goods. I mean, you can see how this is already giving up, right? And here you're giving up violence. Shouldn't have had to have told you that, you see. Yeah. And then you're giving up untruthfulness, and then you're giving up coveting people's goods, and then you're giving up sensual appetite that's out of control, and then you're giving up gift giving. So it's really pretty much, I mean, usually you might not hear it explained that way, but isn't it just all getting rid of? It's dissolution of the mind stream. Everything that's on your mind, if you get rid of that, then you feel better. That's all. You're lighter. You can go on with your journey without being weighed down. Your days are filled with lightness and so forth. And then you get to the practice part of it, and it's austerity, scriptural study, devotions. You get that contentedness, see, first, and then purity. And then you've satisfied the first 2 limbs of yoga, and you go on to posture, breathing, sense control. And finally you get to the good part of yoga, concentration, meditation, absorption. And when you get to absorption, along the way you have 4 kinds of seated samadhis you're going through, and then 1 grand samadhi, which is like nirvana or nirvikalpa, called asampragyata. So sampragyata means seeds, like this being strewn everywhere, you see, by these hands. And the 1 unseated samadhi that's the highest is asampragyata. So no seeds there. You've burnt them all. Sri Ramakrishna said if you strew paddy before the rainy season, come back and it's a riot of growth. But if that paddy is just put over the fire for just 30 seconds and then strewn, after the rainy season, there's nothing, no growth. So you burnt all the potential for the seed to sprout, and that's what you want to do with thoughts. This is what he's saying here, that thoughts are great disasters, enjoyments are dread diseases, and sufferings are diseases of your thoughts, and you don't want those to fructify. So you burn them all, day to day. Why not just stay in an even mind all day? Why think about things? Why brood on them? Why worry about them? Why fear? Well, that's even just one level of it. But even why entertain anything lower at all? Either entertain the highest or nothing, see? Because you're planting seeds in your mind and you're watering them as you do this, and karmas are coming forth and you're asking yourself, why? Why me? The town we live in Hawaii is called Waimea, so people suffering there, I just say their mantra is, why me? Why me? So, we'll get to this after the break more, but you see here, I wanted to read you particularly Vedavyasa's take on this kind of samadhi, these kinds of samadhi, because we want to look at these seated samadhis in accord with these 7 stages that we just looked at, the first 3 stages. So listen to how clearly the father of Vedanta elucidates on the father of yoga's system, because father of Vedanta, some hundreds of years later, looked back on the system of yoga, just like father of yoga looked back on Buddha's system. That's like 500, 600, 7 years, as if it's the same soul coming back and showing you a different view of the same teaching, according to the age and temperament of people. So Vedavyasa then later on says about yoga, when the mind field expands to know underlying principles which support it, that is called vitarka. It's like outer cognition of things. So your senses are in the field of the objects, basically. But the orientation is different in yoga. If you're a worldly person and your senses are in the field of the objects, it's pleasure and pain. It's the pro and con of things, you see. But if you're a yogi practicing early units of yoga and your mind is out there doing the vitarka, savitarka, with reasoning, with outer cognition, you're doing that to renounce it. You've been told early, you're looking in that not to possess it, and not so that it can master you, because Patanjali said in this day and age, he was talking about 140 AD, in this day and age the seer has become slave to the scene. And so that's backwards. Turn it back around, so I'm myself again, and the objects are mine. I don't belong to them. Like watching a TV, it just possesses you. Or the computer screen or the cell phone these days. So you have to make sure that, the seer is, the seer. You are that. So that's the first level of seated samadhi, vitarka. You can see up here, savitarka, accompanied by gross thought, focused on names and forms, mixed with the gunas and shadowed by doubt. So if you're doing it, if you're at this level, and you're doing it as a sadhaka, as he's saying here, you want to practice it, then these are the things you are concerned about, you see. And you know the field, the senses and their outer objects. You know what field you're in, and it's you're doing to master it and to detach yourself from it. You see, as non-attachment, the 3rd stage. You're at the asangsarga stage of the Akshi Upanishad system. And then he goes on to say, because this is the briefest and most condensed and most clear sentences on the 4 samadhis in one paragraph I've ever come upon. He says, when that's number 1 then, the mind expands to know the underlying principles which support it. That's outside. Now, when it seeks a more refined expansion in order to comprehend the subtle supports behind appearances, that is known as vichara. So now you're at the savichara stage. So first it was seeing the objects outward, checking in, I know them, that's the supports of the universe. But what are the subtle supports to those? Now you're going back inside and you're finding you're in a second kind of samadhi. Remember, we're talking about a samadhi you're in. But I'm making distinction here that if these definitions are applied to a worldly person, that's not samadhi. That's pleasure and pain coming again and again in rounds. So they're not in samadhi, they're in Maya. So there's really not any difference, except in the consciousness, the grade of consciousness that's looking onto it. So be in samadhi with objects right now. Vivekananda said, they all have enjoyment, but none of them know exquisite enjoyment. If he smoked a cigar, which he did, once every 3 years if it was given to him, then he would get exquisite enjoyment out of that, you see. This moment is Brahman, you see. Somebody saw him smoking a cigar once. He said, that's not very yogic. He said, I picked up the habit in high school, and now somebody offers me one. I go around the West, and some guy goes up to his hearth and fireplace and cracks a box of cigars and offers me one. So, it's not like, 20 a day, or a pack a day, or 2 packs a day, but basically, exquisite enjoyment is how Vivekananda said that. You should be having exquisite enjoyment out of your relationship with objects, not just enjoyment. And so, the householder will feel guilty about this because the monks aren't having any enjoyment, you see. So that can be the problem of Judeo-Christian guilt and so forth. And they see somebody coming from the East who's completely renounced and we've got this level, and then you're looking at this level. You're talking about a sannyasin who's like a sun that lights up the whole universe as compared to a householder who can barely light up his own house. See? So a vast difference in degree of mastery over objects and things. Or, if you want it, monk or householder, somebody who knows the field. Because even the householder here came to know the field, right? By studying the doctrines, the categories, he too took his place amongst the knowers of Brahman and had samadhi. See? Yogic, tantric kind of samadhi. Maybe not the Advaitic, Vedic samadhi that the monks, some of them, but those are different paths for different people. So that's the second one here. The third one is when bliss is experienced upon knowing the gross and subtle. That means if you know both the outer objects and their inner supports, because maybe I didn't explain that well, the outer objects are thoughts. So they come from thoughts. So you're in the external world when your outer senses are looking at them. And when you either go into dream or you meditate, you've gone into, your consciousness shifted to the inner world. And you've shut your outer senses down. I mean, that's the whole purpose for shutting your eyes in meditation, really, is not to see God or, to pretend like you're in meditation or something. It's just to turn off the sense objects, to be without the senses, and then to know that there are inner senses. People skip this stage and they try and get to a 30-day vipassana or some long meditation in a retreat when they're not even anywhere near ready for that in stages. And so they're falling afoul of the system and they're falling backsliding, as Patanjali says. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Oh, I did a 30-day vipassana retreat. How do you feel about that? See? I'm blown away. And it will take me about 6 months to get my mind back, you see. But if I had have gone samadhi by samadhi, and I knew that having full relationship with the objects consciously was a kind of savitarka, was an outer samadhi, and then I connected those with the inner origins of things, which is why you studied the categories of Sankhya, because earth connects to smell, and water to taste, and fire to sight, right? Yoga 101. I mean, that's really the asana you should be learning. Not these physical asanas. The first asana you should learn, Yoga 101, is how the 5 elements connect with the 5 senses. Because then you'll know how to get from outer to inner, or from stage to stage. See? You can guide yourself that way. Check in with your teacher, and with the seers, and with the scriptures. Is that how I do it? Yes, that's how you keep going, you see. and over years of practice of dissolution and so forth, then you'll have this absolute courage of your convictions, confidence in everything that you do. Mother will speak to you, and she'll tell you, you're on the right path, my son, go forward, go forward. She who since birth has ever led me on through passive trouble to perfection's goal, she'll tell you, go forward, go forward. So savitarka savichara goes along with the nirvitarka nirvichara. They're outer and inner sides of both. So there's an outer and inner to the outside. There's an outer and inner to the inside, too. And this is all to get rid of it all, right? I mean, you want these seeds burnt, not strewn. I mean, this is really kind of an image I found that means people are having millions of samadhis out of control. It's called enjoyments, but they're all ending in sufferings, which is a kind of samadhi too. I mean, notice in the Gita, 18 chapters, the first one's called the Yoga of Depression. Vishada Yoga. So you can have bad experiences that are good for you. In fact, they're better than the good experiences are for you, the bad ones. So yoga is, Patanjali is always having you face off against these negativities. I hate to break this right now because it does connect. Let me finish. When bliss is experienced upon knowing the gross and subtle, that's called ananda, sananda. So you're actually getting bliss now from both the inner and the outer. This is where exquisite enjoyment comes in. The third kind of seated samadhi, on the way to formlessness, that is that you're having bliss with everything. So the Upanishads, rishis, they said, our children are showering bliss upon us. The corn, our crops, are showering bliss upon us. This is right out of the Upanishads. So all these things, people are just looking out the window and saying, the grasshoppers are on my corn, or my children are doing evil things. But for the rishis, it was like they're showering bliss upon us, you see. So they're in a sananda state with objects. And it's been based upon evenness of mind, and renouncing the world. I mean, so yes, you can live in the world and be perfectly happy if you've renounced it. It's not such a big deal, even for the householder. But if you hold any hope for it whatsoever, then that's going to get mixed, you see. Seeds, lots of seeds, and they won't be burned in the right way. So we'll pick it up at Sananda after the break, because Sasmita, he says, and when evidence of a unified self occurs, which allows the removal of all distinctions, that's known as asmita. So you have a ripe ego there now, in which to enjoy all these. It's brilliant. It's excellent. See, nobody's ever done it before. Explained samadhi, because in Vedanta you get, remember, nirvikalpa and savikalpa, with imaginations and without imaginations. See, kalpas, with time, without time. He's saying here there are two kinds of detachments. You see. So we'll follow this train, make more connections after the break. Namaste.